Well, hello. Here we are today live at TTI in Texas. I am sitting here so happy with Mike Morton, CEO of TTI. We are here for a Leader in Highlight podcast, and I'm so thrilled because I have been trying for this podcast. How long, Mike?
It's been several years.
It's been several years, so thank you for agreeing to be here today, and just really honored and blessed to be here right now with you.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Okay, so we're going to get into the whole purpose of our Leader in Highlight podcast is to highlight the leaders that we don't get to talk to very often. And leaders like Mike Morton, you hear about him, we see you maybe at different events, but we don't get to sit down personally and talk to you, Mike. And there's so much inside of you, all your experience and everything that you, in your career journey leading up to this point. So I want to get to some of those nuggets of who you are as a person, what leadership skills are required now as we look at leadership, and what we can think of as we're moving into the future. So with that, I'm going to start and just ask you, here we are, you're sitting here as CEO of this amazing organization. Tell me about your journey. Where did it start? How did you get into this industry?
Well, I got into the distribution industry, actually through the hardware business prior to TTI. Was in procurement type of roles in the hardware business. And then after that, myself and a couple others opened what's today known as a 3PL, but it was local logistics before joining Paul. So I've really had a distribution background my whole career. Electronics only for 47 years.
Well, only. Okay, so you mentioned Paul. So let's backtrack on that. So how did you meet Paul, and was that what led you to come over here to TTI?
It was what led me to come here. We had a mutual friend, one that I was working with in the hardware business. Mm-hmm. He left the hardware business and came to work for Paul, and he was the one that was instrumental in introducing us, as Paul was doing all the buying, which I don't know that he ever really gave up completely. But he was doing all the buying, and we were only resistors at that time, and he wanted to get into capacitors. So he was looking for somebody with a purchasing background, which I happen to have, and we were introduced together and agreed to go to work together.
That's awesome. Well, I've heard, I never got to meet Paul in person, which is so unfortunate. I think everybody in the industry feels like they probably knew Paul, but even if they hadn't met Paul, there's so many people who adored Paul Andrews. So tell me about Paul. What were his traits that people loved so much? Why was this a man who left such a legacy? What is that about?
Well, first off, I'll say he's a very compassionate, very easygoing, very comfortable guy to sit and talk with, if you will. Made everybody feel welcome to have a conversation with him. Didn't matter what his role was, his title was, whatever. He was just a person who enjoyed other people. So, he was a very simple but complex man in that the fact is, he would be involved in so many different aspects of the business, but also on the personal side. He was very, very charitable. And the fact is, he got involved in a lot of things that a lot of people didn't really know about. Really? Yeah.
Well, and so I think he was very humble. It sounds like, from what I hear of so many people, like you said, a lot of people didn't know a lot of things he was involved in. And it sounds like he just had such a good heart, which it just seems like, so before I started I was in the channel for many years, and TTI was literally, I'm not just saying this is really true. I loved working with your organization when I was in the rep world. I found that a lot of your managers, people I dealt with, there's just a certain something about people in your organization that's very real. People are genuine, people are nice. Tell me about this, Mike, because it really is a cultural thing. How have you all been able to attract this kind of talent and retain them for such long-term employment?
Well, I think you hit upon an important part. That's an absolute critical area of our company. Being nice is so underappreciated. And that's really, a lot about what Paul was about, was being compassionate, being nice. When you look at whether you're competing against the TTI, doing business with TTI, his philosophy was always give somebody a reason to want to buy from you, not need to buy from you. And of course, that goes into the individual person, and then the company is supporting that person. But we understand that buyers want to do business with who they choose to do business with, not that they have to do business. So be that company that people want to deal with, and be that individual that people want to deal with.
It's so true, because you know more than anybody, it's such a relationship-driven industry.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Relationships are so key. So, okay, so now we're talking about Paul, but I also want to hear about, there was a time frame where Paul ended up joining forces with Berkshire Hathaway. So let's talk about that. And then the transition from then to now, some of the new organizational changes.
Sure. Well, Paul was 65 at that time, and his family was not in the business, and he didn't want something tragically to happen and someone else would decide ultimately the fate of TTI. You know, if he would have passed, then his family would have sold the business, and he had no control over where it was sold to.
Yes.
So he wanted to be the one, not only that founded the business, but the one that decided from a legacy standpoint, where does this business go, who owns it? Did not want to sell to a strategic buyer, really didn't want to get into private equity, so he was really looking for a holding company to be able to take ownership of TTI. Fortunately, he had a friend here in Fort Worth that had sold their company, which was the combination of Acme Brick and Justin Boots, to Berkshire Hathaway. And Paul was introduced through this common friend to Warren, and they had a conversation sitting on a couch, no slide projectors, no anything. But they had this conversation, and what Warren was really interested in was, would Paul stay with the business, and would the majority of the people stay with the business? Because that's what he knew was the cornerstone of it, is a well-managed business. So anyway, that's how it wound up with Berkshire Hathaway. And we were very fortunate that Warren saw the type of company we were and the management team that we had. And to him, it didn't matter what the commodity was. As a matter of fact, he was adverse to technology at that time. That's kind of changed now with a lot of his investing into Apple and so forth. Yeah. But he looked at us as a service-oriented company, buying parts, selling parts, high priority on quality, customer service, and that's exactly what he was looking for. He was very much into consumer type of businesses, and even though we may not be consumer as we think, it was consumers buying from us.
So there was obviously that succession. So I'm just going to throw this out there. It's interesting. There's certain things that happen in life, even though I never knew Paul. I remember where I was when I heard the news that he passed, and I was driving down the street, and I remember pulling over to the side of the road and crying. And this was a person I had never met. I just sat on the side of the road and I cried, because I thought, he has made such an impact on the industry, and I also just genuinely appreciated the kindness that we just talked about, and the person he was, and the impact on so many people. And that's one of the reasons that I was like, I am going to get Mike Morton. I want to interview you. I want to hear all these tidbits. And I really had it in my heart for so long to want to interview, Paul. But so that's why I appreciate you so much taking the time, because these interviews really matter so much. They matter to others. So what legacy from Paul do you feel is being now carried over to TTI, and what does that vision now look like with all your new announcements moving forward?
Well, before I get into that, let me just comment that regarding his passing, we're now just 2 weeks from the third anniversary of his passing, if you will, on February 27th. So it is very real and very, reminding, if you will, at this point in time. I think what's also, I guess, really interesting just to learn is, we were a 50-year-old company. Paul passed on the eve of our 50th year.
Wow.
So effectively, he didn't get to be here on the 50th year. But certainly, his presence is still known today just as much as it ever was. He still has his office here. And that's one of the things we've committed is his office is exactly like it was when he left, full of family pictures, full of the work stuff and so forth. And as long as I'm here, that office will continue to be here, and that's the legacy of Paul here. You know what Paul really brought, so many different things. Again, I'll start with compassion, honest, ethical. He was always afraid of failure in everything he did, and that just drove him to be even better at all the things that he did. Again, it's very important how people are treated, and he set the example, and it's very contagious of how we treat each other.
Right. I love that, Mike Morton, because I think people need to understand how important that is, how we treat people as leaders. And I'm just going to tell a quick story about you, because remember when we were at Electronica, it was last Electronica a couple times ago, and that was during a time where there was some recent changes with Michael Knight, Don Akery. They were the original ones that got this whole our program going here. And I was feeling like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen, right? I wonder what's going to happen at TTI. And so I'm there having our reception. And then when I saw you coming down the corridor, walking over to the reception, I was like so happy. And I just thought, what a gentleman, what a nice man. He has so many things to do, and he's taking the time to come over here. And I remember I walked up to you and I kissed your hand. I was like, thank you, Mike. Thank you for being here. And really, I mean, it just is the TTI way. And I just want to tell you, really, Mike, I really appreciate the support you've given us and all the women in the industry. So I just want to just shout that out to you.
Well, good. Thank you. It's important for us to be part of and to help being one of the enablers of we, and that's very important to us.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And so I wanted to ask you, okay, so let's just start real quick with, let's backtrack. You have some new announcements. So you've had some personnel changes, different promotions and things going on, and new announcement that I read in your parent company and how you want to be seen.
Sure.
So let's talk about that.
Well, if you look at our company, of course, TTI is both the parent company, but there's also TTI, the operating company.
Right.
And as we made acquisitions, and let's just talk about some acquisitions we made in the semiconductor area, and if an announcement comes out, TTI acquired a semiconductor distributor, then it's TTI getting into semiconductors. Well, that was sending the wrong message, because that was really the TTI parent making the acquisition.
I see.
So I felt it was really important to the industry to show that there is a TTI Inc. And then today we really have two global operating platforms. There's the Mouser Electronics, but then there's the TTI IP&E business, which is really the original, the founding business. Both of those global platforms are equal in size. Both make up about $4.5 billion. But that's really the change, was having a parent TTI, which, as you can see on the background here, is really identified as the electronic component specialist, versus TTI, the IP&E specialist.
I see.
And then, with that, elevating John Drabick from the president of the Americas to being the global president of the IP&E business, being a peer with Glenn Smith, who runs the Mouser part of that business.
Okay. Well, that's good. So you guys have a lot of exciting things going on here at TTI. Things are rocking and rolling. So, okay, so let's now talk about, we talked about your career and how you first started in the industry, but what skills did you develop at different roles and different times to now be in this position as CEO? Because I feel like sometimes people get into positions, they don't always realize where they're going to get, and sometimes it's quicker than they expected, and sometimes, so what, if for people listening, like if we have an industry, think about it, we have probably about a 70% leadership turnover in the next, say, 5 to 7 years. There's a lot of people gearing up for leadership roles. What skills are needed?
Well, if we talk about, what skills that I brought and what got me here was, I'll have to back up to when I started with Paul.
Okay.
And again, was going to have a purchasing type of role. And he said it would be purchasing resistors. And I said, that's great. What's a resistor? Well, right then and there, he said, how about you go out to I was going to call it a warehouse, but it's a storeroom at that time. We were about $1 million company. But go out and learn everything about resistors that you possibly can. Not someone's going to teach you. You go learn about this particular product that we were in at that time, the only product we were in at that time. And really the message there is you don't wait for anybody. You go and I guess that's really the difference between learning and being taught. Right. You go find out and you learn. The advantage I had really at TTI, because we were such a small company, I think there were 10 employees at the time, was I got to do a little of everything, whether that be operations, whether that be procurement, whether that be sales, whether that be dabbling in the IT side, not so much the finance side, but in the quality side, but in all aspects of the business, which gave me that broad background of at least job functions. While the majority of my career was with one company, I got to experience all the different functions within that one company. And so the diversity, my reply to you there is the diversity of getting involved in all aspects and learning all aspects of the business certainly positions you better to have responsibility for the business.
So let me ask you this. When you were in a position where now you were finding out that you were CEO, when all that happened, were you a little afraid?
No, not at all.
No.
I would say prior to Paul's passing, for a number of years, he had put me in a position as chief operating officer. And of course, at any company, a chief operating officer can mean different things. It was basically the CEO position, but didn't want to confuse the fact of having two CEOs, or he really didn't like the title of chairman. So he really put me in a position about 5 years prior to that, using the COO position, but allowed me that opportunity to basically run the business. Specific to the TTI side, did not have responsibility for Mouser though.
Okay. Well, that is really interesting to know, and for a lot of leaders to know, because we're finding in our industry succession is kind of a hot topic and something a lot of people haven't really thought of too much. So good to know that Paul really thought, and it seems such a seamless transition. So I could see how what you're saying, it really makes sense that he had already geared you up, because it does seem like it was an easy transition.
Well, part of the requirement from Berkshire, specifically from Warren, is every CEO must send in a sealed envelope every year as to, in the event of, then you put this person in charge.
Wow.
That still exists today.
Okay.
And so when his passing came about, and Berkshire, specifically Greg Abel, who's the vice chairman of the non-insurance business, came down to visit, he had the envelope. He says, this isn't a matter of interview, it's a matter of Paul said, which is the same as any CEO of a Berkshire company.
Wow.
Predetermines every year who that successor should be.
That's really interesting. Good to know. And I'm going to just kind of veer off real quick just to ask you, because I just am so curious. What is it like having a meeting with Warren Buffett? I'm sure you've met with him and you meet with him. How is Warren?
Well, first off, he's the most happy-go-lucky, jolly guy that there is.
Really?
That has nothing to do with wealth or anything like that. He is just a happy man.
Wow.
Now, quite honestly, the number of times that get to meet with him are very infrequent.
Right.
Simply because he's got an organization today that's got Greg Abel responsible for the non-insurance business and a JIT responsible for the insurance business. Warren is available to, anytime that you want. But the fact is, he's really taken a step aside, I won't say back, but aside, and allowed Greg and Ajit to run the businesses. But do get a chance to visit with them every now and then. It's, in May at the shareholders meeting. That's another opportunity there. Last year was sitting with him. We actually had a Fort Worth table, but, we had TTI, we had BNSF, the railroad that's based here. Justin Industries Acme Bricks based here. So Fort Worth is kind of like a Omaha South, where there's more companies in Fort Worth owned by Berkshire Hathaway than most any other cities. Anyway, my point there was we had a Fort Worth table visiting with Warren, and of course it's hard to visit one-on-one with Warren because there's always someone coming up wanting to ask him or tell him or interrupt him. But just to show you how, again, how simple he is, he always says that, number one, at 93, he's into his extra innings. He also says, because he's very well versed on insurance, he says the healthiest time of anybody's life is being a 6-year-old. So he says, I eat like a 6-year-old. And to that point, after he ate a little of his chicken sandwich, they brought him 3 bowls of ice cream for lunch.
Wow.
That's just the kind of guy he is.
Oh my gosh, I love hearing these stories, and I'm just throwing it out there. I want to reach Warren someday. So we'll get Warren someday. So, all right, so let's get back to some other questions that I wanted to ask you. So where do you see TTI in 5 years, in 10 years? What's the outlook?
Well, we will be a bigger company, for sure, and that's a combination of organic growth and the strategies to grow within the companies that we have today, as well as some inorganic growth. If we look at products that we're in, we do have with the XTG group, we do have $1 billion semiconductor business. Well, $1 billion you can't really scoff at, but the fact is $1 billion in semiconductors is quite small. So certainly we'll continue to build on that specialty semiconductor business that's being run by Michael Kennedy. And we've got that reporting in through Mauser because of their involvement in the semiconductor business also. Putting the two together would be about a $2.5 billion semiconductor business. Again, small player on the scale of big, but that will become much bigger. The IP&E business, even though we may have a share today that is in the teens, the fact is there's still a lot more business that we can go generate. I look at the past couple of years when there's been, so much growth in our industry. And of course, the concern last year was when a lot of that growth goes away, if you will, or that overheating of the industry. We were able to replace every bit of that business that was considered opportunistic. So we continue to be able to generate and find, whether it be new customers or develop new products with our suppliers. We find ways to grow. And again, it goes back to, I think, the biggest contribution to our growth is being a company that people want to buy from. The sale, we don't have to go out and sell our company. We can be the guys that they want to buy from.
So you're saying when the market heated up with all that excess buying, so you were able to replace all that
100% of it.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing when you see other distributors laying people off and doing things right now to try to recoup from that whole time. So where do you see distribution as a whole? So we talked about TTI, what you're seeing for TTI in the next 5 years or so, but what do you see about distribution as a whole? Do you think that we're going to keep growing, or can we keep growing at this rate?
Well, I think the last couple of years with the disruptions in supply chain has added value to distribution. I'll say distributors are the best at managing supply chain. And I think with what we experienced the last couple of years and the multiple disruptions that we saw in the supply chain, that's what led a lot of customers and suppliers recognize the true value of distribution. Somebody needs to have inventory.
Right.
Now today, a lot of somebodies have too much inventory, but the fact is, somebody's got to have inventory, and that's really the role of distribution. We're fortunate in that Berkshire sees inventory as a way to profits and revenues, revenues and profits here. There's always a too much inventory position. But the fact is, we will always carry, as a whole, more inventory and probably have less than half the inventory turns that any of our competitors have. Maybe some of the specialists will be in the same areas, but the broadline distributors will have typically 2 times the amount of inventory that they have.
And is that some of the reason here I am in this beautiful facility that you've redone? So tell me about that. So what was the whole purpose of redoing this facility? Are you adding more space for warehouse? Like what's happening?
Well, the warehouse is not at this facility. It's about 5 minutes from here, and it's a 1 million square foot facility for TTI. And then I got to include Mauser in there too. About a half hour from here is another 1 million square foot warehouse just to support the Mauser business. But here at the offices, I just wanted to make it a comfortable place to be, wanted to make it a place that employees wanted to be. And I think it's turning out pretty nice.
It is pretty nice, I have to say. I like it, and we're going to get more of a tour later on today. So let me just ask you also about technology. So here we are in this technology industry, and what always has fascinated me about our industry, well, first of all, it's exciting, right? We get to design in products to all kinds of applications, medical, all kinds of, we have an influence on the globe that I think sometimes we really don't take into consideration. But also, technology is really heating up. If we look at AI or some of the advanced technologies going on, how do you see that in particular? Let's talk about AI being such a hot topic. How is AI impacting TTI as an organization and maybe the industry? What are you doing to stay on top of all of this?
Well, first and foremost, I don't know that we know every time we're selling a product into a customer. I don't know that we know it's AI related. Typically, when you hear AI, you think more of really the technology, as you say. But the fact is, you look at all the data centers that are required for AI. Well, all of those take climate control, and products go into climate control to be able to keep those centers cool. It's just an example. When we're seeing a number of our customers in the HVAC, their business is doing extremely well because of that. Now, do you consider that to be AI related or not? Some do, some don't, but the fact is it is. So I think it's still a little cloudy as to what do you classify as AI? Is it in support of, or is it generating it? And it's both. Right. I don't know today that, well, I'll say for us, I can't tell you how much of our revenues is going into AI related, and I don't know that anybody can just yet because we really haven't defined it close enough as a market category. What's really important is our engagement with suppliers as they're developing new products, specifically for the purpose of AI. That's where it becomes really important for us to be one of the first to have these new products. And this is one of the advantages of a Mauser, who's generally first to market on new products. The suppliers have come to rely upon them for introducing their products to the industry, having it in place, and then TTI there to support it when it goes to production. Yes,
really important. Well, it's such a critical topic right now. Here we're coming up on EDS, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be talking about this kind of thing. They're also going to be looking to TTI as you do your normal economic forecast. Or your outlook. So let me ask you about that too. What do you see as the industry outlook, the economic outlook?
Well, regardless of what the economic outlook, the fact is the outlook for electronics continues to be so robust. I mean, anything that's invented today or on an engineer's mind is going to involve electronics in some way. So without regards to what the overall economic picture is, the electronics industry is going to continue to grow. So when I look at that, I look at our industry probably differently than I look at other industries. And in our EDS presentation, we will have a familiar face there once again in Michael Knight that will be joining us too. Nice. He always has some controversial, provocative, so forth, ideas, but very smart guy and very much in tune with still, even though he's running as CEO of a hardware business, the fact is he's still very engaged in the electronic component industry.
And keeps track. And that's really good to note too. See, this is another testament to you, your leadership in TTI, because you had somebody very integral to your organization who you really supported in his decision to go and do something that he was wanting to do, and you're still good friends and he's still collaborating. I love that.
Well, it's kind of the reverse. I came from hardware to electronics. He came from electronics to hardware.
Yes.
But no, you're right. Michael had the opportunity to become a CEO. Regardless of where it's at, he was going to make a great CEO, and the opportunity came up for him in the hardware industry, and he's doing a wonderful job there. The same I could say for Don Akery.
Yeah.
He had the opportunity to be a CEO of a company. I encouraged him to do that, and I think that's working out wonderful for him too. So not that we're in the business to create CEOs for other companies, but the fact is when it happens, there's some pride that goes along with it.
Yes, you're like the launching pad. But no, I love that, because really the true job of a leader is to launch others. It's to really, you keep them as long as you can, but where they can shine, and sometimes if it means going somewhere else. But that's what I love about you. And I heard behind the scenes that you were super supportive. And so I just adore that about you, Mike. I
was super supportive, but you can't take anything away from, they're the ones that earned it. And they're the ones that put in the hard work and so forth. So what they got is what they earned.
Right. I really like that a lot. So I think one of the last questions I wanted to ask you, gosh, these interviews go by so fast. I cannot believe it. They just fly by. I want to throw something out there for you and say, if you can look back on your career and you could say, what was something that you're the most proud of, or what is something that you think, if I could do it again, I would do this a little different. Are there anything that just comes to mind?
Well, on the proud of, there's so many things there that I'm proud of, and those might be personal accomplishments, or those may be helping others achieve their personal accomplishments. But I will say the fact that that I chose to had the opportunity and chose to remain here for 47 years is one that I'm very proud of. And I think that's a great decision. Through the years, I've had opportunities to go do other things, but I made a commitment to Paul, and I was going to stay with that commitment no matter what. If you talk about, what would I tell myself to do something different, I'd say absolutely nothing, because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. I know what the outcome has been, and I wouldn't want to change a thing about that. You get back into the Back to the Future. If you're able to tell yourself something decades ago that you would want yourself to know, that would change the whole outcome. So don't mess with fate.
Oh, I love that. And what are your, so tell me just a little bit, one more question is what's your happy outside of work? You obviously have a beautiful family, you have grandkids. Tell me what you do when you're not here.
In the time period we are now, I have 4 grandchildren.
Wow.
Each of them play 1 to 2 sports. So during the sports season, I would say 5 to 6 nights of the week including the weekend, have something to do with grandkid sports. Wow. And my wife and I try to make every one of them, and it gets hard when they overlap with each other, but they're always grandkids, but they're grand adults later, and you got to enjoy them when they're kids.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, so any final thoughts? Anything, Mike, any closing comments, or anything you want people to know?
Well, the only thing that I want to make sure that I know you understand, but that everyone else is our commitment to we. And I think both from I think it's important to have the financial backing there, and we were fortunate to be considered one of the founding sponsors. But more for our own company and our own industry, one of the things that's so important is attracting people to our industry. And I think that's an area that you and your team can continue to work harder on, is just bringing more women into our industry. And then once in our industry, then the opportunities become afforded. But we have many of our employees that are engaged on a personal level with we. and I know the benefits that they get out of the camaraderie and the meeting with other people and a lot of the events that we has. They're better people for it. And they're better for us.
I appreciate that very much, Mike. It has really been a true honor to be here, and really having TTI as a platinum sponsor, it means more than you realize. Will always be appreciated, and we actually have one of your new younger, fresh employees who is now leading our chapter here in Texas. So I'm so excited to meet with her tomorrow, and really just a pleasure to meet with you and be here with you, Mike.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.